Top 10 Saddest Disney Deaths. Kenai is knocked to the ground and Denai defends him, but the bear knocks the spear out of his hands and it looks like it's over for them when Sitka, deciding there is no other option, stabs the ice around the bear with his spear, causing the ice to crack and break off, causing the bear to fall with him. Kenai and Denai search for him, but only find his coat, spear, and totem, and his spirit assumes the form of a bald eagle. Later that night, a funeral is held for Sitka, and Kenai is enraged that the bear lived while Sitka died, holding the bear responsible for what happened, so he goes out to kill it to avenge Sitka. After a battle which he succeeds, the spirits appear before him along with the bald eagle that morphs into Sitka in an ethereal form. He then approaches Kenai and is very disappointed in his brother's actions, aware that it wasn't necessary for Kenai to kill the bear because he, Sitka, willingly gave his life to protect his brothers. Sitka punishes Kenai by turning him into a bear, in an effort to change his perspective and get over his hatred of bears. Thinking the bear killed Kenai, Denai decides to avenge his death and tracks him down. Kenai manages to escape and meets the deceased bear's cub, Koda. Kenai finds Koda annoying at first, but eventually grows to love him and feels guilty after learning that he is the son of the bear he killed. At the end of the movie, upon seeing Kenai nearly give his life for Koda, Sitka decides to change him back into a human and visits him and Denai in his human form. Knowing that Koda is motherless because of him, Kenai wishes to be a bear again and stay with Koda. Sitka turns Kenai back into a bear and hugs both of his brothers goodbye. Then he and Koda's mother, who briefly reunites with Koda, return to the afterlife, reconciling. The two work together to defeat the poachers and free the rest of the family. After Tarzan is shot in the arm by a vengeful Clayton, Kerchak sees this and rushes at the hunter to protect Tarzan. However, Clayton turns his rifle to Kerchak and fires the shot, fatally wounding the silverback to the horror of Tarzan. Following his battle with Clayton, who died in the confrontation, Tarzan heads over to a dying Kerchak, who was being comforted by Kala. Asking for his forgiveness, Kerchak, in turn, apologizes to Tarzan for not treating him as a part of the family. He then passes on leadership to Tarzan and finally accepts him as his adoptive son, saying, "Our family will look to you now. Take care of them, my son. Take care of them." Before he succumbs to his wounds and dies, Tarzan and the troop mourn his death before Tarzan, vowing to fulfill his promise to Kerchak, leads them on. Shortly afterward, Mona finds Tala's cane on the ground and is informed that her grandmother is dying and receiving medical care, but nothing can be done to save her. Tala weakly encourages Mona to save her people, but the latter is reluctant to leave her grandmother's side. Tala promises that, no matter what, she will always be with her granddaughter, and passes down her necklace with the heart of Tifiti inside. A heartbroken Mona leaves the hut and packs for her travels with the help of her mother. She takes one of her ancestors' boats and sails off towards the reef. As Mona looks back at the island, she's able to witness Tala's light go out, indicating that her grandmother has died. Tala's spirit takes the form of an illuminated manta ray, and guides Mona to the open ocean, beginning the journey. Though Mona successfully manages to find Maui and convince him to sail to Tifiti, their battle with TKA Diaresis ends in disastrous failure. Maui's hook is severely damaged, and he blames Mona for the devastation before leaving her alone at sea. Believing there's no hope in restoring the heart, feeling she's failed her people and wayfinding ancestors, Mona lets the ocean take the heart of Tifiti and it sinks to the bottom of the sea. Coral is seen at the beginning of the film, and she and Marlin swam down below their sea anemone to a small cave where there were hundreds of baby clownfish eggs. Marlin then decided to name half the kids Marlin Jr. and the other half Coral Jr. However, Coral says that she likes the name Nemo, so Marlin says that he'll only name one egg Nemo because he wants most of them to be Marlin Jr. When Coral wondered why Marlin was looking at her the way he did at one point, Marlin asked Coral if she remembered how they first met and made Coral laugh so hard that she tried to get away from Marlin by swimming out of the anemone. When Marlin swam out after her, he saw Coral staring at a barracuda, then told her to get back into the house. However, despite Marlin's attempts to get her to go inside their home, she rushed down to protect the children, and the barracuda went after her. Marlin fended the barracuda off from meeting him, but it then slapped him with its tail, knocking him out in his anemone. With Marlin unconscious, the barracuda ate Coral and her eggs, and presumably, while eating them, one egg fell out of its mouth. When Marlin later regained consciousness that night, he discovered that Coral and all but one of their eggs were gone, as they had been eaten by the barracuda. Weeping over the loss of his mate and children, Marlin found the one lonely surviving egg and named it Nemo to honor his late mate's wish to name one of their children Nemo. A few years later, when Marlin and Coral's sole surviving son Nemo has grown into a kid, with a little right fin due to the slight damage his egg received from the barracuda attack, it is shown that Coral and her children's deaths have greatly affected Marlin, which have caused him to become increasingly overprotective to the point where he does not allow Nemo to go out of the anemone much. To gain acceptance into San Francisco Tech, Tadashi suggests that Hiro participate in the school's annual science fair. Should his invention and presentation impress Callahan, he'll be allowed enrollment. Unfortunately, Hiro reaches a creative rut until Tadashi steps in and advises that he look from a different angle. Tadashi's advice leads to the creation of the microbots. On the night of the fair, Callahan shows amazement at the sight of Hiro's latest invention, leading to the latter's acceptance into the school. After the successful presentation, Tadashi and Hiro have some time alone, during which the older brother congratulates the younger one on his accomplishment, showing pride in the new path that he's willing to take. Just then, a fire breaks loose at the school and the brothers immediately rush to the action. While most civilians manage to escape, Tadashi learns from a survivor that Callahan is still trapped inside the burning building. With no help around to save him, Tadashi volunteers his own life. A fearful Hiro immediately stops his brother, but reluctantly allows the decision upon seeing Tadashi's humanity and motivation to rescue his mentor. After rushing inside, the building violently explodes, killing Tadashi. Even though his final moments are not shown, the junior novelization implies that he was crushed by a falling beam. After Tadashi's death, the people of San Francisco mourn his loss while a heartbroken Hiro falls into a deep state of depression. Over time, Hiro and his friends discover that the fire was caused by Callahan as a cover-up for stealing Hiro's microbots. The three of them finally board the activated train of thought. However, it is quickly destroyed by the destruction of Amnesty Island. Joy tries to leave Bing Bong and Sadness behind in hopes of making it back to headquarters in time, but it is too late as the falling debris of Family Island crashes on Joy's location and falls into the memory dump, taking Joy and Bing Bong with it. Inside the dump, Bing Bong finds out he is slowly fading and on the verge of disappearing forever and has lost all hope. To get both of them out of the memory dump and save Riley's mind, Bing Bong and Joy try to use Bing Bong's wagon to blast out to the surface. No matter how hard they sing, the wagon falls short every time. Bing Bong, in a moment of self-realization, starts the rocket again and jumps off before it flies away, making the wagon light enough for Joy to reach the top. As Joy looks and realizes what he has done, Bing Bong utters his final words, "Take her to the moon for me, okay?" Before fading away as he is being forgotten. However, unbeknownst to Ray, Louis, and Diana, Naveen was kidnapped by Fuslier's demons and imprisoned. It turns out, he wants to steal the fortune of Charlotte, making him the wealthiest and most powerful man in New Orleans. To do so, he has his minion, Lawrence, disguise himself as Naveen via magic to marry Charlotte, thus inheriting her father's fortune. Unfortunately, the master plan was near completion as Diana and Ray come across Charlotte and what appeared to be Naveen, who was really Lawrence in disguise, on a parade float about to marry. Feeling he betrayed their love, a heartbroken Diana leaves the scene. Ray tries to talk her through the moment, but she snaps and hurts him by calling Evangeline nothing more than a star, telling him to open his eyes before he gets hurt like she did. This drives him to tears and looks at Evangeline, but he refuses to believe her and claims for it to be nothing more than her speaking out a broken heart, and instead goes to reveal the truth. He flies to Lawrence and whispers in his ear, "Cap, what you doing, son?" But Lawrence can't understand Ray as all he hears from him is buzzing. He then discovers the Naveen about to marry Charlotte is actually a phony when he heroically finds the real one locked in a small chest. He frees him and puts a stop to Fuslier's plot. However, It turns out Lawrence's disguise is activated by a voodoo talisman. Naveen pulls the trinket off Lawrence and throws to Ray, who flies away with it. Fusilier then summons his demons to stop him, and when he reaches Tiana, he hands the talisman over to her and tells her that she mustn't let Shadow Man get it no matter what. Afterward, Ray fights off Fusilier's demons, but the latter soon arrives and crushes Ray, fatally injuring him. His wounded body is recovered by Louis, who takes him to safety. After Fusilier's demise through the heroism of Tiana, and Lawrence is arrested for impersonation after being discovered by Charlotte and her father, Tiana and Naveen reunite with each other and they proclaim their love, but the midnight deadline has already expired, supposedly leaving the two to be permanent frogs. Nevertheless, they decide it does not matter whether they're humans or frogs, so long as they could be together. Just then, Louis arrives with Ray in his hands, explaining to Tiana and Naveen that the Shadow Man laid poor Ray low and he's hurting awful bad. He gently places Ray on a leaf and he looks over to Tiana and Naveen and asks why they're still frags, to which they reply that they're staying that way and they're staying together. Ray tells them that he likes that very much and Evangeline likes that too. He gives his final farewell before peacefully passing away. A funeral is held for Ray and the Bayou with Tiana, Naveen, Louis, and Ray's family, as they all mourn the death of their friend. The sky clears up and the bright light shines down on everyone from above, drawing their attention up at the sky. In the night, a bright new star appears right next to Evangeline, identified as Ray. Tiana, Naveen, and Louis are rejoiced, as Ray's Firefly family cheers ecstatically for their relative, as he finally receives his longing wish to be with his true love once again. Ray is seen again as a star one last time with Evangeline, both shining over New Orleans, as Tiana sings and dances with Naveen during the opening of her new restaurant, Tiana's Palace. At the end of the film, Bambi's mother is introduced after having just given birth to her only son. She is often teaching Bambi about the forest and warning him of the dangers of man. She and her son endure a harsh winter in which there is little food in the forest. While out in the meadow, she and Bambi find a small patch of grass to graze, but as they eat, she senses danger and tells Bambi to run back to the den as fast as he can. She sprints after him, continuing to urge him onward. Gunshots are heard in the background, but she tells him to keep running, and not to look back. After another gunshot rings throughout the forest, Bambi makes it safely back to the den, but finding his mother isn't with him, leaves and begins calling for her in vain. The great prince finds Bambi, and tells him that she could no longer be with him, and to come with him. This reveals the death of Bambi's mother, and that the great prince was his father. Mufasa is seen the next day as Zazu points out to him a migration of a wildebeest herd, which the former notes to be unusual. Scar appears and reveals that Simba is trapped in a gorge with the wildebeest, and Mufasa rushes to rescue Simba, not knowing it is part of Scar's plot. Mufasa successfully saves Simba but is injured and struggles to climb up a cliff to safety. Mufasa spots Scar waiting for him at the top and begs his brother to help him. Instead, Scar cruelly pierces Mufasa's paws with his claws, then leans in and mockingly whispers, "Long live the king." Before flinging his brother off the cliff, Mufasa falls back into the gorge and is trampled to death by the stampeding wildebeest. As they both gaze upon Mufasa's corpse, Simba is manipulated by his uncle into believing that he caused Mufasa's death and runs away from the Pride Lands. Scar then orders his hyena minions to kill Simba before returning to Pride Rock to inform the Pride of the news of Mufasa and Simba's deaths, and takes the throne as king of the Pride Lands, letting the hyenas run rampant and throwing the circle of life out of balance. Scar also outlaws mentioning Mufasa's name, especially in favoritism. Several years later, Mufasa appears as a ghost. Rafiki, having discovered Simba's survival, finds Simba in an attempt to convince the now-adult lion to return to the Pride Lands. Rafiki takes Simba to a small, magical pool that brings Mufasa's ghost up in the sky. Mufasa tells Simba that as his son and rightful heir, Simba must remember who he is and return to the Pride Lands to take his place in the circle of life. This encourages Simba to return to his homeland, where he discovers the truth about his father's death, defeats Scar, and takes his place as the rightful king. thus avenging Mufasa. In the final scene of the film following the death of his evil brother, Mufasa says, "Remember." As Simba stands triumphantly on Pride Rock to claim the throne, looking up at an opening in the storm clouds revealing the stars before signifying the beginning of his reign with a powerful roar. Years later, Ellie and Carl marry and turn her old clubhouse into their new home. To make a living, they become employees of the local zoo. Their marriage is a happy and loving one, and they look forward to starting a family together. Unfortunately, Ellie suffers a miscarriage and learns that she is now infertile. She falls into a deep depression soon after, so Carl shows his wife her old adventure book, reminding her of the promise that first brought them together, and they begin to plan a trip to Paradise Falls, as they had always wanted. However, the couple is forced to postpone the journey for several daily reality problems such as bills, car repairs, medical expenses, and age ailments, but without losing their happiness. Ellie eventually forgets about the promise as her and Carl's marriage continued to flourish blissfully into old age. Then one day, while out on another picnic with her husband, who was planning to surprise her with the plane tickets he had bought, she collapses and becomes hospitalized. Before she dies, Ellie gives Carl her old adventure book but cannot tell him of its true meaning. Her funeral is held in the same church where she and Carl had their wedding. After her passing, Carl mourns for Ellie and copes with his loss by conversing with the portrait of Ellie. This also caused him to become cranky to others. Near the end of the film, Carl comes across an addition to Ellie's adventure book. Unbeknownst to her husband, Ellie had added photos of their happy life together in the adventure book and a final message saying, "Thanks for the adventure. Now go have a new one." Her heartwarming note reinvigorates Carl at last, and he moves on from losing Ellie to living his life to the fullest. In a twist of fate, following Carl's adventure, their house ends up on the cliff overlooking Paradise Falls. Thus, Ellie's wish finally came true,